You may be surprised to know, if you have one of these notes in your wallet, that you already have a contract with our honorary graduand. It reads, "I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £10, and is signed Andrew Bailey, Chief Cashier." Andrew was Chief Cashier of the Bank of England from 2004 to 2011, and he says that taking a new banknote from a blank sheet of paper through the process to circulation, as he did with the Adam Smith £20 note, was a particularly interesting aspect of the role. But be careful, those old £10 notes ceased to be legal tender on the 1st of March. Bankers, according to surveys, are regarded by the public as a particularly untrustworthy profession. And it is a little comfort to them that they are seen as more trustworthy than journalists and politicians. But Andrew Bailey is no ordinary banker. For much of his career, and particularly in his present role as Chief Executive of the Financial Conduct Authority, he has been responsible for upholding the highest standards of probity in the financial services sector. Andrew comes from Leicester, where his father was a head teacher. He himself was educated at Wigston Boys Grammar School, as it was then called, now the sixth form college next to the university's main campus. Although he cannot recall his career ambitions at that time, he is pretty confident that they did not extend to being a central banker or a financial regulator. A successful school career was followed by an equally successful university one, as Andrew proceeded to achieve a first in history at Cambridge and then to take a PhD on the impact of the Napoleonic Wars on the development of the cotton industry. This led to a brief spell as a researcher at the London School of Economics, but Andrew concluded that he was not called to the academic life. The Bank of England, which he joined in 1985, offered a far more interesting path. There, at the heart of the nation's economic affairs, he held positions of increasing importance. Perhaps most significant for his personal development, from 1996 to 1999, he was private secretary to the then governor, Eddie George, Steady Eddie as he was known, for whom Andrew came to have considerable respect as a man of great judgment and with a strong commitment to the bank and its values. This was a period of significant change when, on the one hand, the bank took responsibility for setting interest rates through the Monetary Policy Committee, while on the other, supervisory responsibility for the financial services industry was transferred elsewhere. From 2007 to 2011, Andrew played a vital role in ensuring that the country survived the financial crisis, taking responsibility for the bank's operations to resolve the problems in the banking sector. The present governor, Mark Carney, has said he regards Andrew's work in managing the crisis and developing a new regulatory framework as exemplary. We should not forget how desperate the financial crisis was, both in the UK and around the world. Famous and seemingly unshakable names, which might have thought they were as safe as the Bank of England, like Lehman Brothers, Lloyds Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, either went bankrupt or had to be bailed out. Economies around the world were locked in recession. Individual investors, large and small, suffered. And it is a matter of lasting sadness to Andrew that the financial crisis caused so much pain to so many. In such circumstances, steadiness, clear thinking and vision were needed. Andrew Bailey has provided them. In April 2013, he became the Chief Executive of the new Prudential Regulation Authority. And then in 2016, he was appointed to his present position as Chief Executive of the Financial Conduct Authority, responsible for maintaining the integrity of the UK's financial markets through the regulation of all the many firms, banks, building societies, financial advisors that provide financial services to consumers. It specifies the standards, carries out investigations, and can impose bans. We all have an interest in its effectiveness, and it is not surprising that the FCA is subject to close critical attention. the FCA and indeed the name of Andrew Bailey are rarely out of the news. Controversy is never far away. Within the last fortnight, for instance, with regard to the treatment of small businesses by the Royal Bank of Scotland. Understandably, one of Andrew's principal concerns at present is the impact that leaving the EU will have on the sector he regulates, and whether the UK will be able to maintain open financial markets. He is also troubled by increasing levels of indebtedness and lower levels of savings at younger ages, with the consequences this may have for retirement in future generations. Andrew's is a huge and exceptionally demanding job, so it is reassuring that our chief financial regulator is capable of escaping its pressures with his family, his greatest satisfaction in life, and that he still finds time to disappear with them twice a year to a small community in Idaho, his wife's home state, to go skiing and mountain biking. As the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, said at the time of Andrew's appointment to the FCA, "Andrew is simply the most respected, most experienced, and most qualified person in the world to do this job. Anyone who has dealt with Andrew knows he will be tough but fair and understands the flaws and merits of the sector better than anyone." That is an accolade that we are happy to endorse today. Mr. Chancellor, on the recommendation of the Senate and the Council, I present Andrew John Bailey, that you may confer upon him the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws.
Well, thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Public Orator. It's absolutely a great pleasure and privilege to be here in my hometown and to get an honorary degree from Leicester University. As the Public Orator said, it's even more so because I spent 7 and a bit years at school next door at Wiggiston. And there are very good reasons to be very proud of Leicester. For me, its long record of outstanding social tolerance stands out amongst those. Now, as the orator said, people sometimes ask me what I wanted to be when I was at school. I wish I could remember, as he said, is the easy answer, but I have to confess it was not at the time to be a central banker. And as one of my colleagues at the FCA said, you don't ask many kids at school and hear them say, I want to be a financial regulator when I grow up. It's not something you hear every day. But if I turn that question around for a moment, you probably deserve a better answer to the question why you're still going at it after nearly 33 years. And that's actually a very easy question to answer. I've never ceased to enjoy the challenge of difficult public policy issues, and I can tell you, and I will tell you in a moment, that they keep coming. And I consider myself exceptionally fortunate to be doing something that I enjoy so much, because to be honest with you, so many people in the world don't get the chance to enjoy their work as much, and I think that's a great thing to aspire to as a graduate. But after 33 years, it is possible to reflect a bit on the things that I've seen and the things that I frankly still only understand imperfectly. In our world, one of the big questions is why does it take major crises to fundamentally change the approach and to enact much-needed reforms? If you take the Bank of England and the Financial Conduct Authority together, they're responsible for monetary stability, the stability of the financial system, and conduct in the financial system. And there have been 2 major crises in my lifetime, one before I started at the Bank of England and the other during my career. The first crisis was the global inflation crisis of the 1970s, and the second was the global financial crisis starting just over 10 years ago. The first led to a shift to low inflation as the explicit goal of monetary policy around the world, including operational independence and the creation of the Monetary Policy Committee in the Bank of England in 1997. And as the orator said, I was fortunate to be involved in that as Private Secretary to Eddie George, the then Governor of the Bank of England. And if you ask me the question who has had the most profound influence on my career and how I approach the challenges and what lessons I draw that I apply today, It is without doubt Eddie George. Inflation has become rightly the explicit focus of monetary policy, so much so that it's odd to think that in the past this was not the case. For me, the definition of why inflation matters and when it matters comes from Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. He said that inflation is an issue when it reaches a level such that on its own it becomes a factor in the decisions people take, whether to buy something, to invest now or later, or not at all. Now, it's often said that Alan Greenspan has a way with words, and that's usually a lot of words. And I should warn you that somewhere central bankers learn to write very long sentences with many subclauses. It's a sort of gift. But what does it mean for real? Well, let me tell you a story about Leicester University. In 1975, Britain had an annual inflation rate of 24%. I was at school next door, and I needed to buy the annotated text of one of Shakespeare's plays. I can't honestly remember which one it was, I have to confess. So I did what you did in those days. I came to the Leicester University bookshop, which was next door to us. And the price of the book was £1.50. Yes, you could buy a book for £1.50 then. For some reason that I can't explain to you, I'm afraid, I don't remember, I didn't buy the book on that day. And I came back a week or two later, and the price had gone up, by means of just putting a sticker on the very book that I'd been looking at when it was priced at £1.50. So that's a real example of the Greenspan definition of inflation at work, and it's the one that I remember. I'm not quite, though, going to say that Leicester University bookshop caused me to become a central banker. There were about 10 years in between, I have to say. But 10 years ago, we were in the midst of the hand-to-hand combat of the financial crisis. Today, it seems a little bit hard to remember just how desperate and unpredictable those times were. But as I said, crises have a way of shaping responses. Adversity focuses the mind. And it brought into dramatic relief the public policy objective of the stability of the financial system. As someone once said, you certainly see financial stability in sharp relief when you don't have it. Out of the crises has come much stronger regulatory standards and much clearer public policy objectives, both here and internationally. Now, what we didn't know at the time, in the heat and immediate aftermath of the crisis, was how important, in my view, strong international regulatory standards would turn out to be today for another reason. We didn't foresee 10 years ago there was going to be a referendum on UK membership of the European Union and a decision to leave. So why are these two things connected? Well, you sometimes hear a lot said, every day actually, you hear a lot said about trade and financial services, in which the UK is a world leader, and many of you have just graduated with degrees related to financial services, and many congratulations on doing so. Financial services is not really, contrary to what you may hear on some days in the news, really about traditional trade agreements. Wholesale financial markets, which is really what most of the argument is about, are open today not because of a trade treaty or because of the World Trade Organization, worthy though they are in other respects, but because we have international regulatory standards that protect the public interest. It wasn't the case that we had those standards 10 years ago, but the lessons of the crisis have, in my view, been learned. And these regulatory standards are more global than regional. So I think, hope and believe that the debate this year, which is going to get stronger, will be more focused on what level of regulatory alignment for the UK and the EU will enable continued open markets. Because there's no doubt that the continuation of those open markets is in the interest not just of the UK, but of the EU as well. Now, the world can appear to revolve around Brexit these days, in the UK at least. To counter that notion, I want to end with 3 quick points, which would be worthy of a lecture each, but don't worry, I'm not going to do that. But they're points that I think are fundamental to our future challenges in public policy, and we see at the FCA every day, more or less. First, as we said earlier, we have a growing intergenerational issue in many countries, including the UK. Growing debt among younger people, greater difficulty entering the housing market as first-time buyers, and levels of long-run saving for old age which are below past levels and below the levels needed in an environment of very low real interest rates. Second, and this is good, we have a very fast pickup in the pace of financial innovation, which is opening up access to products and choices and demanding much greater access to our individual information as an enabler of that change. And there are many good things about that, but at the same time, we face constantly evolving threats from data loss and cybersecurity. And finally, there's a constant puzzle for me of why, at the same time that regulation gets smarter, the culture of firms and markets that we regulate is also shaped by the values and standards that prevail in society, and how these change over time. Adam Smith wrote in The Wealth of Nations that business interest is always in some respects different from and even opposite to that of the public. That can certainly be true, but in my experience, Adam Smith's observation needs to be developed somewhat in the sense that the interpretation of that meaning of the public interest has not been and never will be independent of broader societal values of which the business interest is one. And all these things and more should and will keep us occupied. So let me finish once again by thanking Leicester University for giving me this honorary degree. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great pleasure to receive what I think is an honorary degree in laws, as you put it, because I can finally say to our lawyers at the FCA, you know, I've got a law degree too. And I'm going to say that on Monday because it will change the balance somewhat. So I'm very privileged to be a recipient today. Thank you very much.